All right, everyone. It is Wednesday, August 30th. So we are on the second to last evening of the Intro to Coding Live JavaScript, the August class. So we've come a long way. Session 8, we don't really have any notes to take this time. So we're going to, then there's a couple of slides. I have the solution to a challenge that I owe you that I screwed up basically trying to jump into it with not enough time to explain it. And I definitely coded myself into a corner, but it's a good exercise because I know as new software developers, learning a language, like it can be frustrating. And it sometimes seems like the people with a little bit of experience are infallible. And that was a pretty good illustration of me blowing myself up because I got too far ahead of myself and I wasn't concentrated on walking through it step by step. I was trying to make the time crunch, which was 100% on my fault. But as you guys got to witness, I fell flat on my face, right? As soon as class was over, I was just like, oh, that's what I was supposed to do. And I was basically off by one line. But part of the problem was that I was rushing and I wasn't practicing what I preach, which is, again, to take everything one step at a time and keep moving forward incrementally. So let's go ahead and go over a correct solution for the two strikes array and go a little bit more in depth into what's happening here. And then we're going to cover a couple of slides for session 8, which just highlight what the overall tech stack looks like for Code Platoon and basically kind of what the curriculum leads you towards in building a modern web application. All right, so if anyone's got any questions about anything that happened between Monday and right now, feel free to throw them out there. If not, I'll get started on solving this challenge. So does anyone have anything for the class? All right, that's enough silence. So let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so let's cover this again real quick. So we have write a method that takes in a string array of license plate numbers. The method should return a string array of any plate numbers that appeared at least twice. If none of the plate numbers appear more than once, the method should return an empty array. We have one parameter coming in, which is an array of license plates, can be an array of strings or numbers. Just looking at the examples that we have down here. All right, now for return, we're going to return an array as well with all of the plates that have duplicates. Okay, and we've got a few examples down here. And let's go ahead and get started on this. So if we take this step by step, so we'll go ahead and console.log plates. All right, just to make sure we know what we're getting. All right, so I'm going to comment these out and get rid of some of the noise here. All right, so that to me looks good. Now, what I want to do is take the first plate off or the last plate, it doesn't really matter, just one of the plates out of here and isolate it and compare it against all of the other ones. All right, and I also know that I need to return an array, and if nothing happens, I need an empty array. All right, so right from the get-go, I can say something like let results equal an empty array, and then I'm going to have logic for my solution, and then we're going to return results. Right, so with this, every time it's going to be empty, but I know from right here, I will at least have one passing test case, right? So like this should be empty, it's empty. Cool, that looks good to me. So the next step is then I want to take a plate. So we can say let plate to compare equal plates.pop. All right, and so we can, oops. Console.log plate to compare. All right, so there is my last plate, 345 B317. Now, where I had slipped up is I was looking at this as a single loop, and it is 2 loops. And then I backtracked myself and said, okay, I need to use 2 loops here. We'll make it a 4 loop. But when we're doing this, because if we write a for loop, right? So if I say for let I equal 0, I less than plates dot length, I plus plus, and then, whoops, I do something like this inside here. What am I doing to plates dot length every time I pop something off here?
You're shortening it.
Yep, I'm shortening it.
Go out tonight.
Mhm.
Downstairs at the garbage for the.
And so if I'm shortening it, what's going to end up happening is I'm not going to iterate all the way through, because I'm going to keep lowering plates dot length. And so this would be an actual instance where I want to use a while loop, right? And then I can keep popping a plate off. And so we covered this last week, or I'm sorry, on Monday, right? So we did recursion, we did truthy and falsy. The actual number 0 is falsy. Any other number is going to be truthy, right? So what I could do is I could say something like this. So I could say, while plates dot length is greater than 0, right? Or I can also just shorten it and just say plates dot length, and I don't need to do a comparator in here, because plates dot length is going to start off as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then every time I pop it off, it's going to get shorter until plates dot length is 0, which is falsy, which will knock me out of my while loop, right? And so I could do something like this. That. And if I run this, there's my plates, and then I stop, right? And same thing, if we're looking for more proof here, we could do plates dot length, right? And we'll run through here, right? 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, and then we stop. Okay, so now this is where we need our second loop. Okay, and now we can do a for of. So we could say for plate of plates. And let's go ahead and console.log this once. We'll do plate and plates dot length. Right, so this is our first time through our outer loop. This is our second time through our outer loop. This is our third time, and this is our last time. Right, and so now we're going to take this plate and compare it against each of these. Right, and so now we can say something, if plate to compare triple equal to plate, we can say results dot push plate. That, and I think we've got this in a console.log. We do, right? So there is our one plate that was a duplicate in here. All right, and now the rest of these, right? These, well, the last one should probably fail, right? So we end up with multiples in here. And that's why I added this extra one in here as well. Right, so now we're ending up with multiple instances of this in here. So there's, like, we solve for it if there's just one duplicate, but if there's multiple duplicates in here, we still need to take this step further. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do this. The built-in way to do it is if we wanted to filter. So we could, on results, we could do a dot filter and then write what we needed to in a callback function to basically say logic to only return unique values. But outside of using a built-in here, we could also add some additional logic so that we only need, we don't need to run the additional filter, right? And so right now, we're saying plate to compare triple equals plate. If so, then push it in there. Now, if I take, oh, sorry. For an example here, 1 second. Let's go down here and we'll say, let example array equal 1, whoops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. All right. And if I console.log, example array dot has own, or sorry, not has own, index of, and let's say I put the number 3 in here, right? I get 2, 0, 1, 2, so that is correct. But if I do 5, I get -1. So I could use some additional comparison up here and say, and results dot index of plate triple equals -1. So what that means is if plate is not located inside results, right? So the first time we come across the duplicate, so we'll look at this example, right? The first time we come across the duplicate, we get to here, we say, okay, actually we get to this one and we say, here's a duplicate. So plate to compare is equal to this plate, but then we also need to look in results and ask the index of the plate. And if there's one in there, it will give me an index value, but if it is not in there yet, it will actually give me a -1. So the first time we find a duplicate, it will say -1 because it isn't in there. We will then push it in there. And then every other time that we run into that duplicate, it will actually return a index value and this will fail. And because we're using a logical and operator, both of these have to be true for the entire thing to be true. All right, so now if we do this, go ahead, comment this out. Right, there's just my 2 duplicates. And I don't have duplicates of my duplicates. All right, well, should run into something similar down here as well. All right, and I just get the 2 instead of 3 2s in there. All right. Any questions on the steps that I took to solve this?
So just again, to back up to the conditional you have in the if statement. Could you explain again the results dot index of plate, kind of what's going on there? I understand that so we're looking at if the plate to compare equals plate, and I guess I'm still kind of confused with the index of.
Right. So remember, so again, coming down here, right? So if, and here, let me make I'll do these strings instead of numbers, so it's a little bit clearer for everyone, right? So we do A, B, C, and E, right? So index wise, we have 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? So if I ask for index of string B, I will get 1, right? It will tell me that. Now, if I ask for D, because there is no D in here, right? I get -1. And it's the same thing here, right? Like if I delete this and it's empty, just like results is up here, I get -1.
Yeah,
And
I get it. Yep.
yep. So what I'm saying is, if these are duplicates and it is not already inside my results array, add it to my results array. Right. So it only does it the first time. And then every other time after the first time, this will be true. Yes, it's a duplicate, but this will become false because you'll never get that -1 again, because once D's in there, right, now I'm back to getting an array or an index again. Does that help?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Cool. And let's see, Nika, let me grab this code, and am I okay to copy pasta this into the screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me do this here real quick. So we'll comment this out. And let's drop this in. Okay, so we've got function 2 strikes plates. There is your empty result array. So we're doing a for loop. With the for loop, I don't, let's see here. So yeah, I mean, it is still working for this, but I don't know if there is a case where that would screw up the for loop. I don't know if it locks it in the entire time. Let's see here, console.log plates length. And let me just comment these out here again. All right, so we get 5, 4, 3. And so we're not going all the way down here because we are basically doing it. So I think what my question would then be is, if we did something like this, maybe. Let's see. So now that's a duplicate, right? So we're cutting it off here, and so we're not iterating through it enough times. And that's why, because every time we pop something off, right, we're reducing the length of it by 1. And so, and we're increasing this, right? So the first time through, right? So if we have I and plates dot length, right? The first time through, I is 0, plates dot length is 6. And then the second time through, it's 1 and 5, and then 2 and 4. And then on the 4th iteration, we're at 3 and 3. And this is false, so we stop iterating early, which is why we would use the while loop and say, as long as there's something left in the plates array, keep going.
Okay, that makes sense. Is it okay the way that it was added with the if statement, or is that not a good way of doing it?
Yes, this would work as well. So this is, you're checking to see if it's in there. So dot includes returns a Boolean value, true or false. So if it's in there, this returns true. We put the bang operator in there. it becomes false. So this would be correct for that. So if we took this and said while, and then said plates dot length, and get rid of these. Right, so now we're good. Like this works. So,
Okay,
but
thank you.
yes, for this part, this is absolutely a correct way to do it. So we can make a note of that up here. All right, any questions on any of this? So those two questions were great, so. All right, let's hit the slides for section 8 here. And so we already covered some of this with Greg's presentation. All right, so there's lots of different developer specializations, right? So like we've talked a little bit about DevOps. There's back-end development, front-end development, and then full stack development is someone who is versed in both. Most people will find that they prefer one or the other, but until you are experienced enough, I wouldn't go into it with any preconceived notions. Like I've talked to people previously, like just starting off Code Platoon, where they know they want to be a back-end developer, and maybe that's the case 13 weeks from now, or 15 weeks from now, but I would be open to either. And the other thing I throw out to everyone that's just getting started off is, if you have your heart set on being a back-end developer and you get a job offer for 80 or 90K a year to be a front-end developer, are you going to pass that by and hold out to be a back-end developer? And maybe you will, or you can financially afford to do that. But just like the best language to learn is the one that gets you paid, the best development job is the one that is offered to you, especially when you're brand new. Now you may get lucky and you may get multiple job offers at the same time, and then you get to be a little bit pickier. But like I said, if you've got your heart set on one type of development and another type of development comes along, jump on it, right? Because once you've got that year or two of experience under your belt, then it becomes much easier to control your own destiny and your own career path. All right, so Code Platoon is a full stack development boot camp. And so on the back end, you're going to learn Python, and you're also going to learn Postgres, which is a database query language, and then Django, which is a Python framework that basically takes Python language written queries and translates them into Postgres and goes and makes queries in your database to get information. Once you have that information, you are then going to present it to a client or a front end. And on the front end, you're going to start off with JavaScript. You're going to do a little bit with HTML and CSS. You're not going to do a ton with HTML and CSS and Code Platoon. I think like maybe it's like 3 or 4 days or a week worth. And then you're going to move into React. And so React.js is the front end framework that allows you to make interactive and feature rich like front end client side web applications, right? So most of the time when you see a website is something that you can interact with. Maybe there's a form on there that you fill out and it's all written in HTML. But however, most websites today, especially anything having to do with e-commerce, like eBay, Amazon, anything like that, Target.com, those are all web applications, and they're interactive. They're retrieving information from a database in real time, dynamic, like they're keeping track. Like every time you look at Amazon and it says X amount of items are in stock, or order by this date, or order by this time and receive it at this date, like that is all dynamic data that can change depending on what's going on. And that's all stored and computed somewhere between a database and a backend server. And then that information is presented to the front end client. All right. And the path that you'll take is like when you first start off Code Platoon, like the first week or so, you're going to be working in JavaScript and Python. I know once you get into the pre-work, I believe, and I'll double check with this with Guillermo, but I believe they have they try and get you introduced a little bit to Python. But up until this point, some people, like if you just do this, you just fill out the application in JavaScript, like you can walk into Code Platoon with very little exposure to Python, which is fine. But if you apply, you get accepted, you're doing the pre-work, and you're getting more comfortable with JavaScript, it's not a bad idea to start to look at Python. And I will say, I mean, it still happens to me, like the last couple months of work, I've been working almost exclusively on the back end. Before that, I worked for a couple of months on full stack, where I was implementing some front end features that were talking to the back end, and I had to build out the part of the back end that they were talking to as well. And you switch back and forth between languages. And it keeps both the syntaxes fresh in your mind. But like I said, the last month or two, I've been writing Ruby for 8 hours a day, and then I come teach class and I'm writing in JavaScript, and I've definitely caught myself typing in some like Ruby built-in methods where they don't line up with necessarily with the JavaScript that I'm writing. And when you're brand new, the hardest part of your first 2 weeks at Code Platoon is when you switch back and forth between languages and you're trying to figure out why things aren't working. And it's because you're in Python and you're trying to write like a JavaScript built in, or vice versa. Vanilla JavaScript is what we're doing in class right now. We're just writing plain JavaScript. We're solving problems with it. Once we get a handle on vanilla JavaScript and the syntax, because I believe I showed the class last week, like just like a sample React application, and you can see that it's JavaScript, but there's a lot more to React than what we're dealing with right now. But like it follows the same conventions, like everything's still written in camel case. Your IDE is going to look at it the same way, and there's going to be a lot of similarities, but there's more to it when you're actually working inside the framework. With that, you're going to get a handle on some object-oriented programming. You're going to get introduced to what a class is and how methods work inside of a class. And then you'll also work on the back end, right? So you're going to learn how to write some raw SQL or PostgreSQL queries. And then you're going to learn how to write those same queries using Python and Django. And then you're also going to learn how to write your own API, which is going to allow you to send information from a database to your front-end client. And on either your final or your group project, you're going to have a requirement that you have your own API, but that you also interact with a third-party API, like a Google Weather API or Google Books, or whichever one you choose. And I'm sure they'll have a few laid out for you. And you'll want to use, sorry, I said the G word and my phone's auto assistant came on. And basically retrieve information from that third-party API. You're going to learn how to set up API tokens and identify yourself to the API. retrieve information, bring it back, format it, and present it in your client. Code Platoon kind of culminates with, like, I think you have 4 assessments that you have to pass throughout it. And then the 5th assessment is your final individual project. And you'll do your final individual project, and then you'll immediately, roll into your group final project. And you'll probably be in like groups of 3, 4, or 5. And you'll actually be writing a full stack web application as a group. And then for graduation, you'll demo that full stack web application to a live audience. And that is, upon graduation day, you're basically alumni. You will go into interview week and interview with any companies that you're eligible to interview with for like internships and apprenticeships. If you're not taking part in the internship or apprenticeship program, then that's pretty much it. And you shift towards basically job seeking mode at that point. And again, I think Greg touched on it. We do have like a employee that is there to help you network and is actively looking for additional jobs outside of like the networking, or I'm sorry, outside of the internship and apprenticeship program. And that is like a service that they offer for life, either the life of yourself or the Code Platoon organization. All right, and that is pretty much it for the slides. Does anyone have any questions about what we just covered, or Code Platoon in general? Okay, so let's go ahead. It is 6:45. Let's take a look at another challenge here. Now, I'll offer a couple of different options here. We can keep going with the functional stuff, or if you'd like to, we can do a recursive one, and I can cover recursion again real quick. With again, like, this is more at this stage where you're still trying to get into a coding camp. Like, it's more for informational purposes at this point. Like, I personally think you get more bang for your buck learning these functional ones, because to the best of my knowledge, there isn't any recursion on the application. But if you want to do one, I'm more than happy to throw one into the mix.
Would you be willing to like walk through one of the recursion ones to kind of talk us through that?
Yep. Yeah, I'm happy. We can do a recursion one as a group here real quick, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll get back into the functional ones here. All right, so let's go ahead and pull this one up, and let me drop the link in the chat. All right. So using recursion, write a function that returns the total number of blocks in a pyramid with a given height. A pyramid looks like this, right? So the very top row is 1, the next row down is 3, right? So we're just, and then the row after that is 5, and the row after that is 7. So for each row, we're basically growing by 2. And the mathematical formula for that is 2 times n minus 1. Right, and that's how many blocks are in each row. Right, so we're going to get a parameter, which is going to be an integer, and yeah, it's going to be an integer. It's going to be a number. Represents how many rows are in the pyramid, right? And we're going to return a number, which is the total number of blocks it takes to build a pyramid with n rows. All right, let me grab the, whoops. So we just got this over here. Right, and so a pyramid with 3 rows has 9 blocks total in it, right? So 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 5 is 9, right? 1 plus 3 plus 5, that's 9, right? And so if we were to look at this, we would have 16 blocks of it. All right, and so I don't need to draw a picture. I don't need to show how many blocks are in each one, right? So we'll say C below. All right, now, what are the 2 different cases that we need inside a recursive function? Anybody able to give me one of them? Okay, Eric, base. Yep, so I've got a base case and a recursive case. All right, so my base case is when I hit my last row, right? And so that will be 1. So base case is okay, so let's go ahead and lay out our base case. All right, so if height is triple equal to 1, return 1. All right, and that's it. So because if we give it 3 rows, the first time we call it, we're going to be at 3, and then we're going to need to call it a second time, and we're going to have a row height of 2, and then finally 1, and then we're good to go. All right, so our recursive case, right? So we're going to return height times 2 minus 1, right? Plus pyramid. And who wants to take a shot at what I would put in my recursive function call? Right, so the first time I call it with this, height is equal to 3, how do I keep working towards height equals 1?
Wouldn't you do height minus 1?
Yep. So this way, each time through, I'm going to be calling my function, right? So the first time through, it's going to be pyramid 3, and then pyramid 2, and then pyramid 1, right? And that is going to hit my base case. And this is going to return 1. And then, so this will return 1. This will return 2 times 2 minus 1. Plus 1, right? And so this 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is 1, and then plus 1 is 3. So this will then return 3 times 2 minus 1 plus 4, right? For basically as we iterate through recursively. Or I shouldn't say iterate through, as we recurse through our functions. Right, so let's go ahead and run this. We get true and true, right? And so if I do something like this, right, there's our 9 and 16. So let's go ahead and grab this here real quick, and let's go over to Python Tutor. And let's do pyramid 5. Right, and so I believe pyramid 5. So if this is 16, the next one down would be 9. So it should be 25 should be the answer here. All right, so let's go ahead and visualize the execution here. All right, so there's our function. We load it up. We call our function with the value of 5, right? So height is 5. So this becomes function pyramid 5. If 5 is triple equal to 5 or to 1, return 1, else 5 times 2 minus 1 plus an additional function call of 5 minus 1, right? And so we execute this, we get down in here into the return, we execute it. Now height is 4, right? And we're opening up additional function calls until we get down to here. Now height is 1. So that means that we're going to hit our base case of 1. So that means we're going to return 1, right? So this will now say return value is 1, return value is 4, return value is 9, return value is 16, and return value is 25, right? So we recurse down our call stack, hit our base case, and then we come right back up the call stack and pop each of those functions off and return the value. All right, and so that was this was very similar to the sum one that we did on Monday. It's just the additional wrinkle of having some slightly more complex math in here instead of just summing up the number itself. All right. Any questions on how I solved this one? Okay, so again, the important thing is that every time you're dealing with recursion, the first thing you should do is identify what your base case is and your recursive case, right? And we will solve our base case, implement it, and then we'll have our recursive case that will happen over and over and over again, calling additional function calls until we hit our base case, and then everything starts to resolve itself. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at, we did 2 strikes. Let's take a look at sum of negatives. That's arrays and loops. Drop that in here. All right, so write a method which takes in an array of integers and returns the sum of only the negative integers in the array. Right, so sum of negatives. So we look at this first example, 3, -1, -9, 2. Right, so we get -10. Sum of negatives, 4, 5, and 1. Right, so there's no negatives, so we get 0. All right, so we've got an array as our parameter. Okay, so this you're probably able to solve with a couple of built-ins, but again, we want to practice working with arrays and loops. So I would say try and solve it with a loop first. Once you've solved it with a loop, if there's still some time left, you can start to play with how to solve this with some built-in methods. Okay, so let's take a look here at the pseudocode. So all right, so let me go ahead and stop the recording here. All right, everyone, 7:32 p.m. Central Time. Welcome back from the sum of negatives and arrays and loops challenge. Real quick, I am sharing my screen. You can see the challenge, correct?
Correct.
Cool, thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and walk through solving this with a loop. All right, so we can say console.log num array. Right? And there's our so, or I'm sorry, our array. So we're looking good there. Now I need to go ahead and have a variable that will hold the sum of all my negative numbers. So let's go with trusty results here again. So we'll say let results equal 0. Right, so if we have no negative numbers, results will just return 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and say for num of num array, and let's console.log num. All right, 3, -1, -9, 2. So that looks good to me. I'm actually getting each of my numbers. And so now I need to basically filter and only do something if I am if my num is a negative number, right? So we can do a compare or an if statement here for comparison, right? So we can say if num is less than 0, right? And we can do results plus equals num. Right, and let's go ahead and take a look at this here real quick. And let's just console.log results. All right, so I get -10, and that's true. And let's go ahead and see if we get that for our 0 case as well. And we do, we get true, true. All right, so that's what we need to do to solve this for a using a loop. So let's go ahead and comment this out here. Actually, we don't need to comment all, well, we can comment all of this out. And we'll do solve with built-ins. All right, so first off, all right, remove negative numbers from array. I figured I'd get more hits than if I said positive numbers. So let's go ahead and see what this says. All right, array.filter, filter function, return x is greater than -1. Okay, so I know that if I do MDN array.filter, let's dig into this here real quick. All right, so filter, a method of array instance creates a shallow copy of a portion of a given array, filtered down to just the elements from the given array that pass the test implemented by the provided function. Right, so like in this instance, word.length is greater than 6, right? So we would only get exuberant, destruction, and present. So we don't need a length. So we could just say something like num and then num less than 0. So let's go ahead and throw a filter in there and see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and console.log num array. Make sure we're still getting our whole array here. Right, so there's that. And then let's say dot filter num and num less than 0. Right, so this is now empty, and this is a -1, -9. So that looks like a good step to me. So let's go ahead and do this. And how do I sum all values in an array? JS. All right. To get the sum of array elements in a JavaScript, you can use the array reduce callback initial value method. The array reduce method invokes the callback function once for each value, each array element, and passes the result of the callback function next to the call. So let's see here. Right, so reduce partial sum a is our callback function, partial sum plus a with an initial value of 0. So let's go ahead and take a look at something. So I'm just going to grab this whole thing right here. And let's also just we'll do MDN array dot reduce. The reduce method of array instances executes a user-supplied reducer callback function on each element of the array in order, passing in the return value from the calculation on the preceding element. The final result of running the reducer across all elements of the array is a single value. The first time that this callback is run, there is no return value of previous calculation. If supplied, an initial value may be used in its place. Otherwise, the array element index 0 is used as the initial value, and the iteration starts from the next element, index 1 instead of index 0. So we do not have to give it an initial value of 0. I don't mind giving it an initial value of 0. And the main reason for that is because if you ever run into something like basically like where the first value is not correct or something like that, or if it's null, like I believe this will throw an error without that initial value. So the initial value prevents that from happening. So it's not needed in every case, but if you do it every time, you can prevent some unneeded errors. All right, so they've got accumulator current value, accumulator plus current value. I like the way this one's written a little bit better. So we can grab this. And we're going to put that right here. Now we're going to take it out of the console.log. We'll go ahead and return. Memory got filter. Got reduce. This. And I'll probably shorten this a little bit just so it fits on the screen a little bit better. Right, so we can call it accumulator and current value. Right, and this can just be 0. We don't have to have it as a separate variable. Oops, what did I do? Unexpected token. So I've got because I got rid of the console.log, but not the closing one over here. And there we go. There's our true. So that's how we would solve this using a couple of built-ins. And if I were to do this, oops. All right, there's our -10 and our 0. Let's just do this here real quick. Pull these out. Filter. All right, so any questions on how I solved either one of those? Or solved that either way? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next challenge then. Let's take a look at initials. I'm not trying to remember this one to think if it's going to be worthwhile here. All right, write a method that takes in the string of your full name and returns your initials as a string in all uppercase. Okay, so this one we'll take a stab at as well. Let's go do this. Chat. That in there. And we'll fork it. All right, so let's go ahead and do the prep for this real quick. And so we're going to get a string as our parameter. And we need to return a string. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and I'm going to put this in the chat first. So there's that. There's the prep. And any questions for me before I send everyone back into the breakout rooms? All right, so let me pause the recording. All right, everyone, 8:08 p.m. Central Time. Welcome back from the initials, so arrays and loops challenge. Let's go ahead and go over a solution. It seems like both teams solved this one in the allotted time. So hopefully, again, a lot of this is just repetition, but you're starting to feel a little bit better about when and how to use some of these basic building blocks. So let's go ahead and say console.log full name. All right. Let's see here. So we get Michael Jordan, Elon Musk, Michael Gary Scott. And each of these full names has a space in between them. So that looks like something that we can split on, right? So we could do something like this, that split, and we'll split on an empty space. And now we've got our array, right? So now we can go through each of these words. So let's go ahead and take this out of the console.log and let's say let array equal full name dot split. And one thing we could do, and there's a couple of different points that we could do this at. So we do need to get everything to uppercase. So we could do this right here as well. All right. So we could say full name, and I believe it's 2 uppercase, right? Split. Oops, because I'm not consoling it. 1 second here, console.log array. There we go. So we've upcased some the other letters, but that's not a big deal because we're going to get rid of those anyways. And so let's go ahead and take a look at our loop. So we can say for name of array. And let's do that. And let's move our console.log up here. And let's console.log name. All right, so now we get it. Now there's a couple of different ways that we can get just the first letter, right? Remember, strings have index values just like everything else. Right, so we need that. Now there's kind of 2 different steps that we could take from here, right? So we could say let result equal an empty string. And we could then do something like this where we say result plus equals name box 0. And let's go ahead and return result. And let's go ahead and console.log result. Right, so there, that is one solution, right? So MJ, EM, MGS, true. Right, so console.log, name initials, right? Longest name I could ever think of. Right, the longest name I could ever think of, right? We keep going. And so this would be one way to do it. The other way that we could do this is if we didn't want to have an actual result here, we could do something like this where we say name equals name 0, right? Because now we're reassigning the value. And then let's go ahead and console.log array. Let's not worry about returning anything yet. Right, well, actually, sorry. So name equals 0. That won't work because I'm making a false copy or a shallow copy of it. So yeah, I would just stick with the way we did it. So I'm not gonna go down that route right now. So this would be the way that I would stick with doing this for right now. When I run these, now we're back to true. And oops, I think I did one thing too far, and we could say equals ELNICETO. Right, and so I would be good with this as a solution. Yeah, so we can clip this out. And I would call this good. So any questions on what I did with any of this? Nothing? Okay, then we can move to the next challenge. So it's 8:14. So I think we should be able to get one more challenge in this evening. Let's take a look at range here real quick. All right, so this will be a good one. So let's go ahead. This. Here's the chat. Let's drop that into there. Let's fork it. All right, so we are going to get two parameters, both numbers. Of our range, and we are going to return an array that has all of the numbers between our start and end, not inclusive. right? So notice how when we say 3 and 7, we get 4, 5, and 6. When we say -4 and 1, we have -3 to 0. So this is going to be not inclusive, right? So we are going to exclude the actual numbers that we're giving it. Right, and the max. All right, so let's go ahead. This, gonna drop that in here, and then I'm also going to just shake up the rooms here real quick. So that people get moved around a little bit. And then same as always. And if anyone's got any questions, let me know. It's 8:18. I will give everyone until we'll say 8:40. So that's 22 minutes to work on this one. And just let me know if you need anything. All right, everyone, welcome back from the range, the arrays and loops challenge. It's 8:42 p.m. Central Time. Let's go ahead and go over a solution here for this one. I think with this, we'll go ahead and do this again step by step. So we'll just console.log our two parameters to make sure we're seeing what we expect to see. A 3 and a 7 and a -4 and a 1. So that looks good to me. Now, I know that I'm going to need to build an array, and I'm going to need to fill an array with my numbers here. So let's go ahead and say let result equal an empty array. And let's come down here and return our result. And let's write a for loop. All right, and I don't know if I'll get this right the first time or not, but we're going to say let I equal min, and it probably won't get it right because I'm not going to do anything extra here. I'm just going to go off min and max here. And I'm going to say while I is less than max, oops, and this is semicolon and comma, and we'll say I plus plus. And let's go ahead and console.log I. All right, so 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got that 3 in there. So we could say let min plus 1. All right, so we've got 4, 5, 6, -3 through 0. So that's looking good to me. Now, when I push, I am adding something to the end of an array. Right, so my first time through, I'm going to get 4. I'll push that in. 5 will push, and that will add it after the 4. So I think push is what I'm looking to do here. So let's say result dot push I. All right, and let's go ahead and take this. this. Let's see, console.log and console.log. All right, 4, 5, 6, -3, -2, -1, and 0. So that looks good to me. And I don't know if both teams ran across this, but I know one of the teams had some questions about this. So let's go ahead and take a look. So when I wrote this one up, I didn't do the standard test where I put the triple equals and this in here. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll take this and say that is that. And that is that. All right. So this at the end of the day resolves into an array, right? So what this looks like behind the scenes is this. Right, so this resolves to this and we get this, but when we do this, we get false and false. And the reason being is that array equality in JavaScript is a little bit tricky because it actually goes back and looks at how the array is referenced in memory, because it is at the behind the scenes, it is an object. And so if we look, and I will drop this link in there so you can read more about this, but basically what's happening is, so if we take two arrays here, A and B, right? A is equal to 1, 2, 3, B is equal to 1, 2, 3. And we say, is A triple equal to A? We will get true. But if we say, is A triple equal to B? We will get false, even though they are equal to each other. Right? Like they have the same elements. And the reason being is it's actually referencing a different part of the memory. And so if they have a different reference, then they will not be equal, even if technically all of the elements are identical. The same length. So each of these has a length of 3. Each one has the same element in each index position. All right, and it won't work with this either. So like, I mean, you can see it with this, but notice how they don't have the example of the array to the array, and that will fail as well. And so like in this article, they write a little helper method that takes an array and compares them to each other, right? And so what it's doing is basically saying, it is an array, it is array, right? So so is array, right? Is array static method determines whether the pass value is an array or not. So it's just telling you that this is an array, true or false. All right. So that's the first part of it. So that has to be true. And they're saying that they have the same length, right? So this has a length of 3, this has a length of 3. That has to be true. And then lastly, they're using the built-in method every, and we're giving it a callback function of value and index. And it is saying, is the value in the first array that you give it the same as the value in the second array at the same index position, right? So the first time this loops through, this value is 1 and the index is 0. And then it's saying, is basically the second array at the index of 0. So when we do A and C and we're getting true, it's saying, is C box 0, which is 1, equal to this, right? And it does it through each of these values. And so if it passes these 3 checks, we would then get a true value, right? And I think Doug and his group just snagged this and did something like this, right? So we can pass in a second function here as a helper function. And then we can say, oops. What did I do wrong here? That's what I did wrong, is we don't have the triple equals anymore. We actually feed it in as array A and array B. And then we get our true. It passes all three of those checks. Right. And so there is no simple way to do array equality in JavaScript. Now, if you're using a testing framework, like Jest is a very popular one, like they will have, so like Jest array equality, right? Like that was a very popular search. So right, so when they have, so like 2 plus 2, we would use 2b4, and that's how we would write that test. But if we were using an array or an object, we would have 2 equal, and what 2 equal is behind the scenes is it's going to be running something similar, like in the background that you don't see, right? It's already a built-in method. It's abstracted away from you, but it's going to do something like this instead of it just saying something like this, right? And so that's how that handles it. You can write your own helper function. I believe this also talks about Lodash, which is a third-party library that's very popular, that has a bunch of additional built-in methods that you wish were in like the core JavaScript library but aren't there. And so Lodash tackles that, like Lodash. Yes. Right. And so the like Lodash is a whole giant library with like, these are all additional built-in methods, right? And these are, so far, these are all just the arrays, collections, date, function, language, math, number, object, right? Like, so there's just more built-in strings, right, that are not in the core library, but are in the Lodash. So people end up creating a JavaScript application and then importing the Lodash library so that they can then start calling on these additional functions to take care of things. All right, so that is it for this one. This is the range challenge. It's 8:53. We're pretty much to the end of the evening. Tomorrow night will be session 9, the final session. There's no slides for tomorrow night. I will say that I mean, it'll be mostly challenges tomorrow night. One of the challenges, and the one that I always save until the last night, is employee data. And if anyone wants to take a stab at this one ahead of time or start looking at it tonight, they're more than welcome to. This is by far the most complex challenge that we have in our challenge list right now. Right. And so you're taking an array of objects and you're transforming that into another array of objects that have a different set of data built from these objects. And so this one, I will, if you choose to, I will either walk through this one with the class or I will give you time to work on it. With that being said, like this one is probably like a 45-minute to hour-long challenge if I give you time to work on it. And there's a lot of different places where you can get stuck on this one, but we can talk more about that tomorrow. And if anyone wants to get a start at looking at it tonight and tomorrow afternoon, they're more than welcome to. And outside of that, unless there's any additional questions for me, I think we're at a pretty good stopping point. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording.